Good evening and welcome to the Pompey Politics Podcast, the podcast where we explore local, national, and international oh, that's great. I'd record that again if we weren't live. Um, international
We're doing
issues
what
in a
now?
calm, measured, and reasonable way. I'm Ian Tiny Morris, and it's been a long week.
It has indeed been a long week. Obviously, we were busy on Wednesday evening. It was our honour to host a public meeting and a meeting of all of the parties involved in the campaign to stop the Aquin interconnector. So that was a pleasure on Wednesday. And also happening on Wednesday. What else happened on Wednesday? Was there something big going on? Was there?
Well, it's been a long-awaited budget, hasn't it? I mean, I think usually we would expect to see the budget sometime in October, but the Chancellor made us wait. I mean, well, you could argue that perhaps it was a budget of 1,000 leaks, where 2 weeks before, as I was munching on my Special K, she popped up to tell us just how dire things were and beware the Ides of November. And finally, this week, she revealed all, as it were, metaphorically. Although, in fact, I think the OBR actually did reveal the whole budget just before she got to her feet.
Yes. Somebody pressed the send button and made that live on their website 40 minutes early, which is being investigated. So they'll get to the bottom of that, I'm sure, to understand kind of what happened. But yeah, let's kind of get into it. It will be no surprise that we're talking about the budget, and as is our custom, rather than trying to give a hot take on the day when everyone else is doing the same, having been exposed to the same information, we kind of let it fester and settle, and us to cogitate on it a little bit and try to see what we can figure out about from that. Well, that's at least our excuse, and we're sticking to it. So the Chancellor of the Exchequer opened her statement by talking about that the government had forged new trade deals with the United States, India, and European Union. It raised public investment to its highest level in 4 decades. She commented about last year's budget, in which she raised taxes on businesses and the wealthiest to fund the biggest ever settlement for our National Health Service. And that these she said were the necessary choices. She turned her attention. Tough choices. We're getting a bit of a wind tunnel effect there, mate.
Sorry, chum.
Yes. So turning our attention to the opposition parties, she identified that the government faced opposition to trade from those who favour isolation and division, opposition to investment from those who believe that the only good thing a government can do is get out of the way, opposition from those who insist that the only way to balance the books is to cut public spending, and opposition from those who believe that you don't need to balance the books at all.
Lunatics all, every one of them.
And she concluded by saying that it's investment, not cuts, to our public services that creates the stability for our public finances, and the single most important factor in getting down the cost of living and in creating the economic growth, the best means to improve wages, create jobs, and support those public services. So that's how she kind of headed into it. But what were the policies that she opened with, and what did the leader of the opposition, Kemi Badenoch, have to say about that? So shall we listen to what the Chancellor of the Exchequer had to say?
Well, I think there's 2 ways we could do this. Okay. Either you can pretend to be Rachel Reeves, I can pretend to be Kemi Badenoch, but I think that's liable to get us both cancelled. So run VT.
Okay, let's go with Plan B.
And I will more than double the headroom against our stability rule to £21.7 billion. The OBR have upgraded Britain's growth for this year from 1% to 1.5%. So we're widening eligibility for our enterprise incentives. I will retain our competitive corporation tax rate. I will also introduce a new 40% first-year allowance, so that businesses can write off more of the cost of their investment up front. And I will today provide further funding to increase planning capacity through a new skills offer. So we are providing an additional £370 million for the Northern Ireland Executive, £505 million for the Welsh Government, and £820 million for the Scottish Government over the spending review period through the Barnett formula. The introduction of digital ID will break the link between illegal migration and illegal working. And the HMRC and the Fair Work Agency will crack down on illicit businesses that blight our high streets and undercut illegitimate firms. Funding to make the training for under 25 apprenticeships completely free for small and medium-sized enterprises. Abolish access to Class 2 voluntary national insurance contributions for people living abroad, increasing the time that someone has to live or work in Britain to 10 years and increasing the contributions that they must pay. And today I will maintain all income tax and equivalent national insurance thresholds at their current level for a further 3 years from 2028. People only in receipt of the basic or new state pension do not have to pay small amounts of tax through simple assessment from April 2027. I will also keep the Plan 2 student loan repayments threshold at its 2026-27 level for 3 years. I will increase the basic and higher rate of tax on property, savings and dividend income by 2 percentage points, and the additional rate of tax on property and savings income by 2 percentage points. 90% of taxpayers will still pay no tax at all on their savings. An annual £2,500 charge for properties worth more than £2 million. Rising to £7,500 for properties worth more than £5 million. Introducing a £2,000 cap on salary sacrifice into a pension, with contributions above that taxed in the same way as other employee pension contributions. These changes will come into effect in 2029. The coalition government introduced 100% relief from capital gains tax on business sales made to employee ownership trusts. I will reduce that relief to 50%. For business rates, I will introduce permanently lower tax rates for over 750,000 retail, hospitality and leisure properties, the lowest rates since 1991, paid for through higher rates on properties worth more than £500,000, like the warehouses used by online giants. I will stop online firms from undercutting our high street businesses by ensuring customs duty applies on parcels of any value, payable each year alongside vehicle excise duty at 3p per mile for electric cars and 1.5p for plug-in hybrids. Increasing the threshold for the expensive car supplement on electric vehicles to £50,000, saving over 1 million motorists £440 a year. I am increasing remote gaming duty from 21% to 40%. With duty on online betting increasing from 15% to 25%. I can announce today, fully costed and fully funded, the removal of the 2-child limit in full from freezing prescription charges and freezing rail fares. I am increasing the basic and new state pension by 4.8%, an increase of £440 per year for the basic state pension, and an increase of £575 per year for the new state pension, and increasing the minimum wage for 18 to 20-year-olds from £10 to £10.85 an hour, increasing the living wage from £12.21 to £12.71 an hour. The temporary 5p cut to fuel duty that was introduced during the pandemic. And so I am extending the 5p cut until September 2026 to get energy bills down and cut the cost of living, with £150 cut from the average household bill from April next year.
Oh.
So you might have gathered that I clipped that quite heavily in order to get the policies in, but not in a way that makes it sound like she didn't say those things. Just to clarify, all that they were said in a different way.
I think that is an epic piece of editing by yourself there, Simon, and hopefully our listeners and viewers will be applauding gently at this point to give you true credit for condensing that down. Well, there's plenty in there, isn't there?
There was a lot in there. I mean, that was about an hour and 7 minutes worth of speech into basically just under 5 minutes, and that's from the Parliament YouTube channel. So I've put into the chat if anybody wants to click the link to that to actually that speech, they can actually go and watch the speech in full if they'd like to see the unedited version. But
I'd like to think of it, Simon, as you've done it, so they don't have to.
it's a dirty job, but someone's got to do it. Yeah. So what do we think? Some of those actually kind of happening at kind of a certain different dates. Did we have any thoughts
I think,
about when things are happening?
Well, I think it was quite a complex budget to follow in regard of, there's always nerds like us will listen carefully to the policies. But I think the thing that I found quite difficult was some start in April, some go to September next year, some go out to 2027, some are in 2028. I think even one of them doesn't kick in till 2029. So I'm always a little bit skeptical of announcements that are made outside of a parliament, because there's always that element of, well, it might not be you might not
be there to make it.
might be there to make that happen. So yeah, a very sort of scattergun approach, and yeah, it's a difficult one, because it's that. And it's partially why we do leave it, because there are individual policies that can either get you vexed or enthusiastic. But I guess what we really need is economists who know what they're talking about other than us, to do the pushing and the pulling and the giving and the taking away. And I think the figure that they seem to have all agreed on is that taxes have gone up by £26.1 billion.
Yes, I'm sure there's someone somewhere doing a imitation of Mike Myers at that point. But yeah, so shall I start kind of running through? Should we start kind of with the stuff that's happening?
Let's have a look at a couple.
So April 2026, the £150 cut in the average energy bill. That's being paid for by basically taking into general taxation some of the environmental stuff, and getting rid of the previous government's eco scheme, which looked to fund basically the insulating and heat pump installations for homes. That the Chancellor said basically didn't actually give people the savings that it was aiming to do, and just meant that everybody was paying more, and it wasn't actually delivering the savings that they want. Frozen prescriptions. Obviously, that's England only, because they don't pay them in Scotland. The new state pension is up by 4.8%. Now, that's the new state pension, which applies to men with the date of birth of the 6th of April 51 and women with the date of birth of the 6th of April 53. But the basic state pension, which is for those retiring prior to the 4th of April 2016, so it's people that are already retired at that point, that's actually going up by 8%. The minimum wage for 18 to 20-year-olds goes to £10.85, and for over 21s to £12.71. The tax on dividends goes up by 2% in each of the categories. The actual percentage tax that you pay overall is linked to basically what income tax rate you're on, but all of them go up by 2%. And the universal credit to child limit is axed, so that will no longer be a ceiling for which you get universal credit payments for more than 2 children. So, anybody want to kind of go into in a bit more detail there?
I guess, and we'll pick an obscure one to start with, which is the 2% on dividends. I mean, I think a lot of people, that will have passed people by in terms of, and this is one of those ones where you can look at it through two lenses. It's either a way to catch people out who are tax dodgers, or it's going to affect kind of entrepreneurial businesses. So effectively, you know, if you are doing multiple different jobs, then you can structure yourself, or you can structure the work that you do as part of a company with yourself as a shareholder, and often Often it is people's significant others that are directors and shareholders of that company, and rather than taking a salary which you would get taxed on, at the end of the year you pay the directors a dividend, and you historically have only paid 20% on that, and that's now going up to 22%. So, it's interesting. A comedian I'm a big fan of, Jeff Norcutt, was very open about that. That's the way he structured his affairs. So, he does different amounts of work and doesn't know what he's going to earn, and then at the end of the year he pays himself a dividend. So you can look at that and say, well, that's not really a business, is it? It's just a way of cleverly structuring your tax affairs.
Yeah, I think with the dividend, sorry, my apologies, I misspoke earlier on. The dividend, it goes up to, so for those on the basic rate, income tax rate, it goes up to 10.75. For those on the higher tax rate, it goes up to 35.75%. But for those actually on the additional rate, there isn't actually any increase. So, which is kind of weird in a sense, but essentially kind of that goes up. I think it was the savings one that we'll come to later on that goes up by 20, goes up to 22% for the basic. But essentially, yes, it kind of, the Chancellor spoke about trying to close the gap between, and she spoke about this later on, where she talked about the housing thing and about landlords, and we'll come to that in one of the other ones, about closing the gap between the different tax rates on different types of income, and essentially the argument being that regardless of the source of the income, they should be taxed at the same rate.
Yeah, and this is something that various governments have gone after. The Conservatives did some stuff a few years ago with something called IR35, which was basically similar kind of thing. If you were working for one company as a consultant rather than as an employee, you couldn't just pile all the money into a company-based account and then avoid tax on it. So that was one of the smaller ones. I guess there is so much in there, and I guess it's that. Do we want to jump to one of the more probably the most controversial of those policies, or pick something else?
Well, I can. We still want to stay on what's coming in next year?
It can do, or we can move forward to the next tranche.
I mean, the stuff in the energy bill is quite kind of interesting, because it's moving more of it. It's moving the 75% of that into general taxation. So again, where will the money for that be found? How will we find the kind of the actual the money for that? And you kind of begin to wonder, could the Chancellor have done something different on VAT for energy bills, for example? Domestic is 5%, commercial is 20%. If that's actually quite such a big thing, then I don't know. But obviously, I've not looked at the books in the same way that she has, and I also don't have a team of people that have spent weeks going over steady spreadsheets.
Well, and I guess again, you love to hug a tree and all that kind of stuff, don't you? In your green way.
Yeah, I'm definitely in favour of having a planet to live on. Yes.
Yeah. So I guess, but did this feel like a kind of a stepping back from the green agenda? Because there's been a lot of noise, most of which is hokum. Climate change ain't real. But there's always been, for me, this kind of, there has been a line on your electricity bill that says, this is you. What's the phrase she uses? Chipping in a bit more, or
I've asked everyone to chip in a bit more, or to help a bit more.
Yeah, to contribute a bit more. And it's like, well, you haven't asked me, because if you asked me, I'd politely decline.
I'd have the option to say no. But
yeah. So I guess, but is this? And I do wonder whether there is a general rowing back from the green agenda, because obviously, and you can argue that if the government subsidy on in insulation and heat pumps wasn't making that effect, wasn't as effective as it could be, then perhaps that was a way of kind of dialing back. But I guess if you put that along with the mileage on electric vehicles, Are we seeing the current government shuffle back a little bit from the green agenda?
I must admit, I'm not reading it that way, and I'm quite sensitive, as you say, to to having air to breathe, and I think I'm not seeing it that way. So I'm sure someone might see it that way, but I must admit, I can only say what I think, which is I don't think that's the case. I think there's a wider case to be made. Obviously, if you kind of ignore all the nonsense about not needing to do something to tackle climate change at all, but it needs to be a fair and just transition. And if it means that if that's kind of levied on everybody's bills in a way that means that everybody pays it equally, that's not really fair, because everybody's not using the same amount, and everybody isn't. People aren't contributing to that in that respect. But at the end of the day, if the scheme didn't work, then surely, if it doesn't do what it was offered to do on the tin, then you should get rid of it, and look at different ways to do it. I just always kind of find it's just, we'll move that into general taxation. That's essentially, we're just going to sweep that one under the carpet, or we're just going to throw that into the cupboard and shut the door really quickly so that everything doesn't fall out. It still leaves you with the question of, okay, well, how are you going to pay for that if the customers aren't paying for it, and the energy companies aren't paying for it, and the generating companies aren't paying for it?
Somebody's got to.
Somebody's paying for it, because it ain't free. And if it's coming out of general taxation, I thought we were screwed for anyway. So what about the min wage stuff? What we got to say about that?
Well, I think the min wage one is a difficult one, isn't it? Because the min wage has, and I think it's, the min wage for me is always a double-edged sword, because, whilst I think, it kind of is accelerating the kind of the base level of income, I do wonder how much it is kind of creating a squeeze, and how much it is contributing to inflationary costs and the rising cost of living. Because when we think about leisure and retail, often the majority of their workforce is either being paid minimum wage or is being paid close to minimum wage.
Yeah. So I mean, I think this is a way to get money in the pockets of people, which, and to me, I get the logic of the general public are much more likely to spend that money where they live, and to basically recirculate that money into the economy. They're not going to go buy a yacht. They're not going to, in all honesty, they're not really going to kind of go invest it in something offshore. They're actually just going to go spend, they're likely to spend it, or to pay down some of their credit card debt, or whatever. So in that respect, it's good for them. But again, it's not that this isn't being paid for by the Exchequer. This is being paid for by businesses up and down the country, and of course, the likes of larger companies, major companies, will be able to find ways and economies that they can squeeze in order to kind of do that. I'm just conscious of the small and medium enterprises. How do they? But then on the flip side, ever since it was introduced, and before it was even introduced, the argument was that introducing a minimum wage would basically destroy jobs, and.
Well, and I actually did a bit of research on this, Simon, because obviously, and we'll come on. It's not like me, I know, but we'll come on to the kind of the thresholds later in the show. But so I went back to 2021, and in 2021 the min wage was £8.91, and obviously it's going to go up to £12.71 from April of next year. Now, again, a lot of us don't look at our hourly rate, but if we think about annual salaries, it was £17,100 a year for a 37-hour week back in 2021. That's now £24,454. And what I did was extrapolated onwards and said, well, if it rose at the same rate between 2026 and 2031, which I know is unlikely because there was a couple of big rises in there. But the minimum wage would be £34,880. So
Yeah,
it would have in 10 years, the minimum wage would have doubled. And and the reason why I kind of bring it up is because I all other wages are not rising at that rate. Apart from probably
I don't
Elon
have the
Musk's,
data, but like you say, you said it yourself. The reliability of a figure you extract from a very short period of time in which there were abnormal occurrences, those abnormal occurrences are unlikely to repeat unless someone kind of decides to try and do a Liz Truss with the, again with a budget, which of course isn't what happened on Wednesday. The markets were quite sanguine about in response, so no one was scaring the horses. So if anything, if that was the overall mission, to land that and to not panic the economy, not panic the markets, then maybe in that respect you could call it a success. But I think I get that. I get the point you're trying to make, and there's a further point about the freezing of thresholds, but we spoilers. Let's get to that kind of later on.
Yep.
But yeah, so that did we want to talk anything about the universal credit 2-child limit for the last one for 2026, or do we want to move on?
I think that's the biggest. I mean, that's probably the most controversial of all of the policies, and I think again. Rachel Reeves was on Koonsberg this morning, and if we look at it in the macro environment, there is that piece where general taxation has gone up by £26.1 billion. That's the agreed figure. Well, 16 of that is to pay for the scrapping of the 2-child cap at £3 billion a year. So for me, that is a political choice to tax and spend. Now, the interesting piece is that again, that has always been the allegation made towards Labour, is that it is spend and expect somebody else to pay for it. So I think there is that element of. There is an element of, I think the scrapping of the 2-child cap was very much a policy for the Labour backbenchers, and it has not been universally well received by the majority of commentators, other than those who sit firmly on the left of politics, and it is that balance of. Do you get people out of poverty by paying them more benefits? That is the, and obviously Kimmy had plenty to kind of say on exactly that. Issue.
Should we play Kemi's video once we've kind of done through the summary rather than?
Yeah.
I've realized, So, I mean, the Chancellor made her case by saying that actually the measure hadn't made any difference to family sizes. All it had done is actually just put those with more than 2 children who were claiming universal credit into more financial hardship, and several independent bodies or organisations from the third sector had said that this was the simplest and easiest way that you could make a difference to child poverty, and it was because it was targeted and it was you knew that it would go to the right people. That was the case that the Chancellor was making, if the measure doesn't, again, as we said before with the eco policy, again the question is if the policy isn't actually achieving the thing that you're wanting it to achieve, and actually all it's doing is just being a financial measure of punishment, then actually is that really a thing? And I think that's the difference between the essentially the theory between the two cases, between the two different sides of the argument, isn't it?
Well, I would go a little further than that, because I think there is where, it is not a contraception method. It doesn't stop people having more children should they choose to. I guess there is a morality. There are many morality questions around it, isn't it? And one of them is that is often that people who are working, where both parents are in full-time work, will look at whether they, potentially, and this comes up quite often, they will take the view that they cannot afford to have more than two children. That's a lifestyle choice that isn't open to them for financial reasons. And the argument is that this, I'm not sure that the policy was ever brought in to stop people having more than two children, but I think it was brought in under the heading of fairness, that the taxpayer shouldn't subsidise large families who can't afford to care for and pay for their own children. And again, that is always offset against the no policy, whatever people would say online. Nobody ever wants to see children living in hardship or poverty. There is always the flashpoint between left and right is always about how you make that happen.
Yeah, but I think that, and this is, I think, why it kind of speaks to what is the policy trying to achieve, and is that the right policy to achieve the thing that you're trying to? So there's two different questions. One is is it a moral thing to try to seek to do the thing that you just suggested? And the other one is this the best policy to achieve that? And what the Chancellor's case was that it wasn't achieving the thing that it was trying to achieve.
Yeah.
And that
I think
about 60% of recipients are actually in work. So,
yes,
60% of the families that it would affect are actually in work. So in that respect, the argument that, with all due respect, that that these are people that are taking from the benefit system rather than actually working and going out to work or do it is not really kind of borne out. But again, we don't have the time to kind of go into the details of those numbers. That's a rabbit hole to go down a different time. But that was the policy, exactly. And that was the announcement. So that was 2026. 2027. So savings, interest, and property income taxes up by 2%. So again, speaking to what we were talking about earlier on, about trying to kind of close the distance between the differences of in taxation for different forms of income. The cash ISA limit for under 65s is cut from £20,000 to £12,000 a year. So removing some of the incentive to saving, but people over 65, they retain it at 20,000.
Let me just pause you there for a second, because I think. Yeah, because I think this one is a bit of this is one that generated some discussion, and I kind of, you can still save £20,000 into an ISA. It's just if you're under 65, you put £12,000 into cash and £8,000 into a stocks and shares ISA. The argument for the over 65s is obviously that people, that is retirement money. So the two different levels are about relative risk. I put it to you, my learned chum, that if you've got £12,000 spare to put into a savings plan, or £20,000 a year spare to put into a savings plan, you're probably not on the bones of your bottom, are you?
Okay, yeah, fair point. Yeah, that's to be honest with you, that's not the argument I expected you to make, but there we go. The other one was freeze in student loan repayment threshold. That's currently at 21,000. So if you've been to university and used the student tax, then you need to start paying back some of the cost of your university once you start earning above £21,000. I haven't got a little video of Nick Clegg to play. Nick Clegg saying sorry. That was the kind of ones for 2027. We want to go into any more detail on those, or
well, that last one for me, I think is really quite harsh. because effectively, it's what we're going to talk at the end about fiscal drag. It's that element of, if you finish your, if you finish your university career and now start on £24,400 a year, which is the minimum wage, you're very close, if not over that threshold. And as the years go on, you would expect minimum wage to keep increasing, and by freezing freezing that levy, I'm a little bit uncomfortable, if I'm honest, that, yes, we want people to go to university. Yes, we want them to have good careers, but there is that element of I never saw the paying back of student loan, and it's 8%. It's not insubstantial, applying to people who are getting jobs in McDonald's after graduating from university.
No, yeah, that's not what even those in favour of the design of the policy at the time, that's not what the policy was designed to try to
No,
do. It was essentially a graduate tax in all but name, on the presumption
yes,
that you were earning more than you would have had you gone to university, and
and
to
that's
set
the
it
thing,
at that
isn't it?
level below the median income is plus the percentage interest that the students are charged is absolutely, but that's probably a different episode.
Yeah.
Anything to say about the 2% income tax going up on savings, interest, and property? What about property? Will landlords start being unhappy about being taxed a higher
Well,
rate?
possibly, Simon, but landlords, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Landlords are always kind of, there's a little bit of, this is probably, but I've been accused of heading far left. I've always struggled with multiple property ownership and it being an investment, not a place somewhere to live. So unfortunately, I'm not convinced that this tax won't just go straight on to the bottom line of, and
The
the
rental
rent
bill.
for your
Yeah.
rent for your one bedroom flat is now,
Mhm.
is now £1,500 a month, not £1,400, because I had to cover the extra 2%. It's like, well, hang on. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not convinced it's going to do. I'm not convinced it's going to do what was hoped.
Yeah, so that takes the tax rate for basic rate payers, for savings, interest, and for property income to 22%, the higher to 42%, and the additional to 47%. But okay, I get. You've surprised me. I'm
I'm a balanced
almost.
man. I'm a nuanced individual, Simon. It's that element of,
Okay, you
I'm,
missed the nuance. Okay, so 2028 was there wasn't much for 2028. The surcharge on properties valued over £2 million will be £2.5 million. £2,500 a year, as basically collected with council tax, which I'm sure local councils would rather they were keeping, but they won't. And for properties over £5 million will be £7,500 a year.
now this is the first quote unquote wealth tax.
Yeah.
And I don't I find the idea of a wealth tax frankly abhorrent. I mean, this one I find puzzling in terms of, it it feels like a gesture more than a real kind of change in
Well,
policy.
it's less than £500 million that
Yeah.
it's going to raise. So it feels like it makes a statement more than it does anything.
Well, and again, one of my favourite spoof news channels, the Rochdale Herald, suggested that the policy had been designed that the threshold would be exactly £1 more than Sir Keir Starmer's home was valued at. So yeah, his Kentish Town residence, I believe, is valued at 1.9995 million. So it'll be interesting to see how the mechanics of this work, Simon. I thought they were going to restructure council tax bands more fully because they are
They were
absurd.
last set in like 1990 or something, weren't they?
Yeah. And it's that piece where, and again, I think she referenced it in her speech that a 3-bed in Doncaster, it pays more in council tax than a £10.5 million home in Mayfair. So I see this, but this felt much more like a sort of empty gesture, and I do wonder whether it's
You've
another
just
one of
frozen
those
me.
Sorry, I wonder whether it's another. I wonder whether it's. I wonder whether it's another one of those taxes, Simon, that when you look at a little bit when they started playing with means testing the winter fuel allowance, the cost of collecting it is going to end up costing more or as much as the the administration costs will slurp a lot of those savings away. So
Yeah.
gesture, no. Let's be honest. Again, I was on one of the radio programs where somebody said, "Well, I inherited a £2 million house in Islington, and I think it's just a modest house, and it's like, well, you inherited it, and it's worth £2 million. So if you've got to pay an extra £2,500 a year, forgive me as I wipe my tears away and play a tiny violin. And I know I'm sounding like a bitter socialist now, but ultimately,
It's just the
you've
politics
inherited
of
it.
envy, Ian.
Exactly that. Exactly that.
So no,
So,
you're astounding me left. You're astounding
but
me
it's
right,
something
centre,
enough.
and left.
Well, I guess for me, if you're gonna do something like that, make it worthwhile. So yeah, let's leave that
I
one
think.
behind.
Yeah, I must admit, I think that the more logical or the braver thing to have done would have been something to wholesale revaluation of the council tax bands, even perhaps actually putting in additional bands for properties that are way beyond kind of the current existing band values, because it doesn't kind of make sense. Or if you're going to go absolutely completely bonkers, start with some sort of local income tax, but let's not completely revolutionise the entire country in one night. April 2029, the salary sacrifice cap at £2,000 comes into effect. What are your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, it's salary sacrifice, and you still get tax relief on it. You just don't get national
ENI.
insurance relief as well.
Yeah.
So it's a kind of it's another stealth tax. I don't like it, but again, it's that element of I guess it's one of those things where you've got to pay for the benefits bill somehow. So take it from people who are earning decent money and are looking to provide for their future. It's an ideological tax, so I can see why they've done it. But yeah, I'm
So I
not
mean,
wild about
that
it.
one would come into effect in April 2029, which would be heading for just before the next general election, wouldn't it?
Yeah. That's
That would be quite an interesting thing. So then it kind of jumps to April 2031. So after the expected date or the likely date of the next general election, and that is so the Chancellor extended the freeze on income tax, national insurance, and inheritance tax thresholds. And it would also see the end of the ISA junior and lifetime ISA allowance. Those would come to an end anyway. So the allowance freezes. Do we start getting into going into fiscal drag?
well, yeah. Let me just kind of quick. Can I just circle back to electric cars?
Yeah, I've skipped. I've missed that off,
Yeah,
haven't I?
yeah, possibly. But yes, so the Chancellor announced 3p per mile, a pay to drive for fully electric
Where did I
vehicles, and a
leave that?
1.5p for hybrid vehicles.
Yes.
Now this kind of baffles me, Simon, because whilst I am not with you dancing round trees on midsummer night naked in a druidic kind of way, I do recognise that one of the best ways, particularly in congested cities, electric cars, not burning petrol, good thing. So I'm kind of bemused as to why they're more expensive than petrol or diesel cars. So the government is got a scheme where they give you money to try and get you to buy one, which they announced they were extending and enlarging. But if you buy one that costs over £50,000, which isn't as it's not a luxury car. You have to pay a super kind of road tax of £440 a year, and now you're going to have to pay to drive it. And the bit that befuddled my brain on this one, Simon, is that there is they're not quite sure how they're going to collect it. They believe the scheme at the moment is you register your mileage and you buy ahead the amount of miles that you think you're going to drive in a year. And then when your MOT happens, you will either have driven more or less miles, and you then have to pay a bit more or pay a bit less, or you've got to go through that whole rigmarole. Now, the average motorist drives 7,400 miles a year. So that means that the cost for a fully electric vehicle is 220 quid in taxation. That's what you're going to pay. How much do you think it's going to cost to set up a new government department to be processing all of the can I pay a bit more, can I pay a bit less claims every year?
I mean, I obviously don't know. Have you actually got a figure, or are you just out floating the question?
No.
Okay.
No, it's a modest tax if you look at it in the grand scheme of things. It's £220 if it's you having to pay it. And there's a whole colossal amount. It's not like fuel duty where you go and stick the snout in the car, you fill up with petrol, they take the money off of your card, and the Exchequer gets some of it. So this, for me, looks like it's going to disincentivize people from fully electrics because, well, if you buy a hybrid, you only pay half the tax, and you might not ever use the petrol engine, but it's going to cost you a cheaper per mile rate. The admin around it, this is just bonkers. And, with my green eco hat on, why would you ever want to disincentivize somebody from buying a fully electric vehicle?
So
Bloody madness.
But I don't. I mean, I don't buy that. I mean, I guess I'm more so. I don't have a driving license. I don't have a car. So perhaps I'm not just getting it. So by all means, go for the comments, guys, and let us know just how wrong I am. But to me, and this was to be fair, this was the argument that the Chancellor made, is that EVs and hybrid vehicles still use the roads, and they're not paying they're not contributing to the tax take in the same way as the fuel duty does, and the VAT that's on fuel does. So in that respect, the Exchequer, as it's going to over time see fuel duty pretty much drop to zero eventually, because no one will be having internal combustion engines anymore eventually, then it needs to replace that income stream somehow. And that was always going to have to be something like this. If it means that this money is used, I think the Chancellor said that it would double essentially the amount that they were going to spend on roads to 24 billion in 2029, then to be honest with you, I think people will be happier to see fewer potholes. So whether is this the right way to do it, or would it have just been easier to stick 0.5% extra VAT or whatever on the electricity for vehicle charging, or a 10p per however many kilowatts of EV charging? Whether there are much simpler, easier ways that you could levy that charge without literally cost charging per mile, because there are facsimiles for just traveling by mile which don't require you to measure how many miles people have traveled. You could also, not me saying, you could also just get people to send in photographs of their odometer every year, and just let AI basically just extract the numbers, check it for manipulation, and charge accordingly. So I think there are ways to do it, but I don't think it's the cleverest and easiest way to do it.
You're going to back the government.
I'm not. I'm just trying to say
AI
that
scheme that was.
No, I've said lots of things, and none of them are saying I think it's a brilliant idea. I just think I think it's, as someone that does, I hold my hand up. I'm not someone that drives a car, but I think it's somewhat a fop to say, but we bought an EV because we didn't want to have to pay fuel duty. Well, come on. You're using the roads. Vehicle excise duty doesn't pay for the repairs of the roads, and I'm quite happy for some of that to be covered by general taxation, because we all get the benefit of us having a working infrastructure system. But surely the people that are actually using it should be contributing a little bit more than me, who cycles.
Yeah. So yes, the additional VAT that you pay on your electric vehicle, which is much more expensive than your petrol vehicle, is a bit of a chip in. But no, I grant you, you could have done a road fund license, like you used to have to pay your tax and get your tax disc to stick in the front window. So yeah, it's just a muddled policy for me, and it's mixed messaging when you we want more people to use fully electric vehicles. And just anything that disincentivizes people from doing that, for me, is mad. So that brings us on to the final piece, which is the fiscal drag, which is basically where the policy to freeze the tax thresholds at the point where we all start paying more tax. Was brought in by the Conservative government in 2021. They put it in till 2028. And Rachel has extended it out to 2031.
Yeah. So is this just something she's just going to claw back on before the next general election?
Well, and this is an interesting piece,
Sorry,
isn't it?
Because on your thunder there. Sorry.
No. I guess I just wanted to give you a couple of quick figures because I bothered to do the research, because again, not like me, which is when we go back to 2021, in terms of somebody who was earning the living wage, 37-hour week, they would pay £928 in tax, and that was equivalent in total 5.4% of their wage. So that's where they were in 2021. Now the effect of freezing it in 2026 is that the same person on the same minimum wage is now paying £2,400, which is 9.8% of their total wage. So, their tax take in percentage terms has more than doubled in the last 5 years. And that is simply the effect of leaving the tax threshold at £12,500. So I think it is significant. It does affect everybody who earns less than £100,000. And I just think it's that piece where it just makes people feel poorer. That's I think the effect of it. And I did kind of extrapolate on to 2031, as I say, if the minimum wage increases at the same rate, and the person then would be paying £4,400 in income tax, compare going back to 900. So there, over the 10 years, their wages will have just about doubled, but their tax contribution will have quadrupled. So yeah, it hurts us. This one hurts us all. And I think for me, the raising of the tax threshold, which was a fantastic Conservative policy that was brought in a little bit of help from the Dems, but we'll gloss over that.
I was going to say, whose idea was it again?
No. We don't want to do. Yeah, we don't want to do history.
I know we talk about. We try not to mention the C word, but
we don't.
Yes. So yes. So I think. I mean, this leaving them where they are saves her about £8 billion.
Yeah. Or half the cost of the 2-child benefit cap giveaway.
Yes, but if I pay a little bit more income tax as my wages go up, I think that's a fair price to pay for children being able to go to school without being hungry. But so I think that I think this would have been the best measure to have done that would have actually kind of seen people feeling it in their pockets. Even if actually in concert she raised the income tax thresholds, but also actually stuck a penny or two on income tax, I think overall that would be quite quite progressive in the sense that it would take more people out of tax and be kind of like a net a net no impact for people on kind of medium incomes. So in that respect, I think that might have been a thing. But again, I didn't see all the numbers. I didn't see all of the things.
No.
Interestingly, sorry, one of the comments that we'd had, I just thought I'd quickly do that before I guess we're kind of heading towards the Leader of the Opposition's response and then the other party's response before we close out. So Catherine saying that she wasn't surprised by anything that was in the budget, but would have preferred to have seen a penny on income tax, as it's the fairer way, and the reintroduction of the 10% tax rate. But very pleased about the child benefit cap, saying that as a childless person. And as for the other emissions, nothing for the environment. Quite in contrast to Zach Polanski's response to the budget on the Today programme. So I've not kind of got Zach's response, but I've got some kind of clips. Sorry, not some clips. Some comments from another Green Party spokesperson. So that's what we've kind of said about.
I guess the interesting piece with that, isn't it, about just finally on the tax bit, is that Rachel Reeves was on Politics Show this morning, basically saying, no, I've honoured all of my manifesto commitments. I've not raised the headline rates of tax. Now I kind of, it's about the letter of the law of the manifesto promise. Yeah. When Rachel Reeves came to the country last year, she said, this is a one-off event. I'm not going to come back and hit you again next year. She's come back and hit the taxpayer with $26.1 billion pounds in rises. So that's, I find it very, very disingenuous to say, we haven't, just because we haven't raised the headline rates of tax, we've honoured our commitment not to tax working people more. And as we touched on, we're asking people to contribute a bit extra. I'll stick it up your nose. It's not a voluntary
request. No, I think that's how most people will see it, and how they will understand it. You can, as a lawyer, you can argue that it's not what was promised. But I think people's understanding of how that would hit them will mean I am going to be paying more tax. That's the opposite of what you're.
So what did Kemi have to say for herself?
Okay.
And may I congratulate the Right Honourable Lady on delivering her second budget. I hope she enjoyed it, because it really should be her last. This is a budget for Benefit Street, Madam Deputy Speaker, paid for by working people. This budget increases benefits for 560,000 families by an average of £5,000. They are hiking taxes on workers, pensioners and savers to pay for handouts to keep their backbenchers quiet. But she could have chosen today to bring down welfare spending and get more people into work. Instead, she has chosen to put up tax after tax after tax, taxes on workers, taxes on savers, taxes on pensioners, taxes on investors, taxes on homes, holidays, cars, I think even milkshakes. Everybody else has read it. She still hasn't read the OBR analysis. She blames higher than expected borrowing costs. Where does she think they came from? Those borrowing costs are driven by her lack of grip. Under us, we had an energy crisis sparked by a war in Ukraine and a global pandemic. What is her excuse? She is taking the public for fools. Just look at the circus around this budget. First the leaks, then more leaks to try to undo the damage. Calling panicky press conferences, U-turning on her U-turns. She's making the UK a shambolic laughingstock to international investors, and if she doesn't resign for breaking her promises, she should sure as hell go for this. There are 1 million more people claiming universal credit than there were at the time of the last budget. Government spending, up. Welfare spending, up. Universal credit claimants, up. Unemployment, up. Debt interest, up. Inflation, up. And what about the things that you want to go up? What about the things you want to go up? Growth, down. Investment, down. Business confidence, down. The credibility of the Chancellor, and not just down, through the floor. Her speech today was an exercise in self-delusion. Today, she had an opportunity to apologize and show some humility. Instead, we've been fed puff pieces in the Times and the FT, wallowing in self-pity and whining about misogyny and mansplaining. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, let me explain to the Chancellor, woman to woman. People out there aren't complaining because she's female, they're complaining because she is utterly incompetent. Yeah! What did the Chancellor think would happen when she went on breakfast telly to do an emergency public service announcement? I interrupt your Cheerios to bring you this frightening message about income tax. And then, unbelievably, she changed her mind 3 days later, making stuff up at the dispatch box, incompetence, chaos, and the highest tax burden in history. She said to them, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'll be there on Wednesday, I'll be there next year, and I'll be back the year after that. God help us.
So
I don't think
okay.
that Kemi was very impressed with that.
I think there were some unsubtle clues that lead you to that
reading
conclusion.
Between the lines. Yeah,
I think so. She certainly made the best of the extra 40 minutes that she had to prepare her speech because of the OBR's bungle. I'm going to very quickly say about the what the other parties said, and then we kind of go to winners and losers. So the Lib Dems, leader Sir Ed Davey talked about the government being elected on a promise of tackling the cost of living and growing the economy, and in this being the second budget in which they'd failed to do either. They know what the damage being done to the country by the Conservative government's Brexit deal was, and a new trade deal with Europe, properly fixing the broken relationship with a new customs union. So not talking about rejoining, but a new customs union. So not but growing the economy and freeing businesses from cost barriers and red tape. The Greens talked about it being a budget of half measures that won't do enough to fix the deep-rooted problems in the economy, and the Chancellor spoke about asking everyone to make a contribution, but it's frankly inexcusable as this has been the political choice to squeeze households already struggling with the cost of essentials while letting millionaires and billionaires off the hook. Whereas Nigel Farage from Reform said that he called the budget an assault on aspiration, and that Rachel Reeves doesn't understand business, and asked who it would be that would pay all of these extra taxes. She talks about growth, and yet the projections for the next few years, growth is being constantly downgraded. They talked about cutting debt, and yet even in their first year, they've borrowed an extra 21 billion, more than they were forecast before they started. So, fair to say, not well received from any of the opposition parties. Essentially, all of them saying you didn't do enough, but in different directions.
Yeah, in different directions, and I mean, let's be honest. No opposition party is ever going to say, "Cool, that was good. I like that a lot."
That was a great budget. No, that's
yeah. So I think we've got to close on that. I think for me, Simon, I look at it, and again, it's been like so much of Labour's for 14 years of Tory rule. Well, you had 14 years to prepare your plans. And it just appears to me to be continually haphazard. It's a tickle here, it's a tax rise there, it's a giveaway. For me, it's incoherent. And I thought Kemi was brilliant.
I have to say, I thought it was one of her better performances that I've seen her of late. And if anything, I think the winners
you love her now.
I definitely wouldn't go that far. For me, the winners in this budget are children in families that are on universal credit and Kemi Badenoch, because I think, if anything, this has saved her from possibly being ousted this December. So, yeah.
I think in terms of losers, it's the ordinary taxpayer. I think it is that element, and we haven't touched on it because we haven't spoken about stimulating growth, because there were no policies to stimulate growth. I
find that strange that the government keeps talking about they want growth. They know the way to get more tax take is to encourage growth in the economy. But there were a couple of things kind of around the edges, investments kind of around the country, but nothing kind of really massive. I can't pinpoint a policy that would encourage growth.
Well, and I think that is the frustrating part of, and that's why I say it's that incoherent narrative for me, which is growth is our number one priority, and we're going to tax our way to growth. I think it was the great Winston Churchill that says that a man who believes he can tax to prosperity is the man who stands in a bucket and attempts to lift himself up by the handle.
Very good, very good. As ever, if you've got any comments on that, please do let us know. Do remember to give us a like, a follow, a subscribe. Give us your thoughts. Give us a comment on YouTube, Facebook. Subscribe on YouTube and follow on Facebook. But yeah, I think that's us for a week.
That's
Next
us
week we
done.
come back a bit local.
We will do. So yeah, next week we're going to have a look at the last Portsmouth for the full council meeting before everyone goes off for figgy pudding. And I do wonder, with Kemi's up, down, up, whether the pantomime season will be in full flow at Portsmouth City Council. But we'll go through the list and see whether there's anything worth talking about there, or whether it's, oh yes he did, oh no she didn't. So you've been listening to the Pompey Politics Podcast. I've been Ian Tiny Morris.
And I've been Simon Sainsbury. Join us next week at 6:27 when we'll go through that preview of the last full council budget for Portsmouth City Council before we have our last show of the year. So do join us next week, 6:27, and we'd love to hear from you. Thank you. Don't forget to like, follow and comment on Facebook, or comment and subscribe on YouTube. Find us on all the social media platforms: Facebook, X, YouTube, Threads, LinkedIn.